passes unanimously. Okay, let's move to the trolley purchase.
Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, we've had already a number of good discussions about this. So this is the action item to purchase some vehicles to replace our oldest buses in our fleet. I'm going to kick it off, but and just remind you of where we've been and where we're going. We had first discussion, or this first came to the Finance Committee in August, and we deferred action because of a couple questions that some commissioners asked. And then we made a sort of overview presentation on all of our trolley services, all of our wonderful trolley services all around the community at the last board meeting, and dedicated this meeting to talk about the finances. About the financial implications of how we operate the trolleys and the kinds of trolleys. So you're going to hear from Debbie and Henry about that. I just want to update you all that since that time, James Bradford, our Chief Operating Officer, and I had a really good meeting with the leaders of the Jolly Trolley up in Clearwater, who are here with us today. Rosemary Windsor and Bob Clifford is the chair of the Jolly Trolley Inc.'s board. And I think we hopefully improved the lines of communication and got a few things sort of clarified about how we do want to work as partners. We want to continue to work as partners. We really think they are a very a great partner of ours, as we do. We love all of our trolley services, including the Looper down in St. Petersburg as well. So you're going to see some recommendations that we didn't have a month ago, but they're based on the discussions we've had with, since then. So with that,
Okay.
Debbie, take it away.
Yes, Henry Lukasik and I are going to be tag teaming today on this presentation, and I just realized inadvertently we've color coordinated as well.
Good job.
We can't get our PowerPoint to come up.
Yeah.
Let me
So
try
do you hit
to,
the little refresh button at the bottom?
yeah, you might want to refresh, because I just had to replace it with a new one, like 2 minutes ago.
You.
No, it's him.
No, it's probably me.
It says downloading,
Yeah.
and it's going like this.
Oh, that,
Like the older one.
I don't know what that
Here's
is.
the older Granicus.
Okay, well, guess we'll have to
Now try it.
watch the screen here.
It's that I can't. If
Technology.
it's
There
working.
it goes, yep.
Yep.
Got it?
Brad knows how to do it.
Okay,
Thank
go
God
back
for Brad.
now.
He's new
Sorry.
tech support.
Go back out again to the Finance Committee, and then hit this little refresh button in the bottom left. Right there. That's what I did for his, so I don't know if that works, but, and then try it.
Magic. Okay.
Everybody?
Brad's a techie here. Okay,
All
good.
right.
That was the first time ever something I've done worked.
Thank you, Brad. Today, as Brad mentioned, we're going to be talking about a recurring capital expenditure, and that is our replacement for our bus fleet. And we come back here at least every year to talk about bus replacements. Matter of fact, some years we ask the board to approve maybe 2 years' worth of replacements. Normally, we replace 8 to 10 buses every year. And when the money and everything aligns up, we'll ask for more buses so we can lock in at the lower rate. Because historically, bus purchases have gone up about 5% every year. This year, we're talking about replacing 16 buses that service our Central Ave and also our Suncoast Beach routes. You can see off on the right-hand side of the screen, those are heavy-duty buses wearing their Halloween costume with their little trolley package on there. And as Brad said, they are life-expired buses. Matter of fact, they've gone through 2 overhauls already, and that's because collectively, they have over 12 million miles on these buses. That equates out to approximately 70,000 miles per year per bus. And we operate those on our Central Ave and Suncoast Beach routes, which are our largest of our tourist and tourist industry routes that we have. As you can see on the chart, our good partners at Jolly Trolley operate 3 routes, and the Looper down in St. Pete, along with PSTA, operates the Looper in downtown there. And of course, we're running our electric buses on that for right now. So we're putting our buses on the largest routes. Matter of fact, the ridership on this is about 1.3, a little over 1.3 million riders a year, which is 300% more than all the other routes combined. So we know where we're going to put them, but how many do we need? So we took a look at this, and we're going to replace 8 for the Suncoast Beach route. Currently, today, we run 7 vehicles on the Central Avenue. And our transit consultants have said we can run less because once the BRT is implemented, we will most likely see riders go from the Central Ave onto the BRT. Now, Commissioner Schulman, who is our BRT booster, feels that we can, which I love your enthusiasm, more people actually come off the Central Ave than what we're actually anticipating today. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but you are our BRT booster, so thank you for that. One of the things that happens, and so we're looking at 5 there instead of 7, and I've taken that into consideration, is that we run what we call plug buses. On a normal average time period, we run usually about 3 plug buses, and what that means is when we want to keep things running on time, we add a bus into service. When we have crush loads where people are standing, we add a bus into service. So normally we're adding maybe about 3 buses in as needed for special events, very busy parts of the season. Matter of fact, during spring break, we add usually 6. So we've anticipated 3 in our purchase there, just for our plug buses. And then FTA gives us guidance to say, these are valuable assets. We have to maintain them, and in order to maintain them, you have to take them off the road, put them in the maintenance shop, and they give you guidance as to say how many you should have as a percent. So we've added 4 spare vehicles so that we maintain these assets for a total of 20. One of the things that we know on all of these routes have really increased ridership over the last couple of years. Now, I've only put up one of the routes, which is the route I like to take a lot, which is our Suncoast Beach Trolley route. And you know, all of these routes are very popular with the tourists. It also helps get people to the jobs that service the tourists. So if we have a mass exodus off of the Central Ave, I know not only can we put it on other routes that service this, but it can also go on any of our routes to be able to help us out, because I replace 8 to 10 buses every year. Now, one of the things that I think is the most important part of all the discussion items we've been having lately, which is why I'm standing up here, is what is the most cost-effective way of delivering the service, and of course maintaining the quality, to our customers. We pay for the majority of our expenses are coming from local funds, from your property tax revenues, from the fare box revenues. And in order to be conscious of what we're spending, we have historically outsourced some of these routes to our partners at Jolly Trolley or the Looper. As you can see on here, our operating cost per hour is $78.89. The contractual rate with Jolly Trolley, $80.80, and contractual rate with the Looper, $78.28. You can see it's very close between all 3 of us. But what really plays into not only on the operating side but the capital side, and they go hand in hand, is the cost of the vehicle. PSTA pays for all of our vehicles with FTA funds, and these are 100% funded by FTA, so no cost to us at all. Matter of fact, when we go to buy buses, it's like going to the Sam's Club for buses. We get bulk discounts. We get bulk discounts through state contracts and bus consortium contracts. So we get the best price available for what we have. Private providers have the option of buying the vehicles outright. They have the option of financing them to purchase them, or they can lease them. Both the finance and the lease, they're going to pay interest just like we do when we buy a car if we're not paying cash for it. So one of the things is that capital costs will be passed on to PSTA. Now what's interesting is the Looper actually gets a free lunch because the city of St. Pete buys it for their trolleys for them. But otherwise, the capital cost from anyone will get passed on to us in our hourly rate. And that has an impact. And one of the things is by buying the buses with FTA funds, no cost to PSTA, if we have the mass exodus to the Central Ave, I'll still need buses. And I'll still need buses no matter where we go. And right now, the buses that we have running, as I mentioned, over 12 million miles on them, two rebuilds. If I end up waiting too long to do the replacement, I've asked Henry and his group, they've looked at what would it be to do a third overhaul, because that's always an option. That would cost us $150,000 per bus for all 20 vehicles, or actually 16 vehicles, that'd be $2.4 million. If we buy half of the vehicles and overhaul the other, that'll be a $1.2 million we add to our operating costs. So my whole thing here is I don't want to add to operations any more operating costs humanly possible, because the only thing it'll do is increase our operating deficit. I'll just let that sit for a minute. I do not want to increase our operating deficit from where we are. Did you have a question, Chair?
Yeah, I think also newer vehicles would have better fuel mileage and other repair costs, so that would also reduce the cost using new vehicles.
Excellent point. So, we were tasked knowing what buses we wanted to replace, which ones of the fleet we wanted to replace, the oldest ones. We also knew what routes we wanted to put them on, but then it became a matter of what type of vehicle would work where we could actually save some of the FTA dollars to put into more buses down the road, because I always need buses. So who do I call? I don't call Ghostbusters. I call our award-winning maintenance team, and I call Henry Lukasik to really take a look at what can we do to replace heavy-duty buses and to be able to meet the duty cycles and to meet the service demands that we have on these specific routes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Henry.
Flip over the next slide. All right, good morning. So for the next several minutes, I'd like to take the opportunity to go ahead and just go through some of the things that that the maintenance department finds critical whenever we come to the board or this committee for the purchase of vehicles. The fleet maintenance department spends a lot of time researching, talking to our industry peers, in addition to the years of experience in the maintenance department, that whenever we choose a vehicle, it is the right vehicle for the application that it is going to exist in. So, three key factors which influence the design of a vehicle: duty cycle, demand, and the route operating profile. So, when we talk about the differences between the bus that PSTA is proposing to purchase as opposed to, say, a lower cost alternative, we have to remember that the Suncoast trolley route and the CAT trolley route is very high annual miles per vehicle, approximately 70 to 80,000 per year. High operating hours. The vehicle is physically out there operating for approximately 18 to 22 hours per day and is encountering high ridership. So those three factors basically equate that to a true mass transit application. Very heavy use. So, like I mentioned before, the right vehicle for the right application. So to kind of illustrate what the fundamental differences are between the bus PSTA is proposing and the lower cost trolley, I've gone ahead and taken some critical foundational pieces of equipment on the vehicles themselves and broke them down into 3 categories. And as you can see in the chart, the dollar amounts that you see are basically equated back to what creates the cost difference between the two. So I'm going to go through each category briefly, and I'm going to just kind of talk about some of the fundamental differences so that these buses that we're proposing will end up going the long haul, 12 to 15 years. So in the first category, we talk about body and frame. If you're going to build a vehicle, the body and the frame is one of the most key pieces of equipment to the vehicle, just like the foundation on your house. It needs to be strong to support the loads, to support the duty cycles. So on the bus to your left, which is the Hometown Trolley Streetcar, that is a 32,000-pound gross vehicle weight vehicle. Again, keep in mind, this is all about heavy-duty usage and heavy-duty application. The other fundamental thing about that particular bus is that it is a monocoque construction. Monocoque means that it is a structure which integrates the body and the chassis together to create a complete structure. And when you do that, think about the unibody on your automobile. Everything is linked and welded and secured together so that it creates a more stiff, rigid chassis and a body structure. The vehicle on your right is only about 19 to 26,000 pound GVWR. It is what you call a perimeter chassis made of carbon steel instead of stainless, which is the vehicle on the left. And being a perimeter chassis, that body is essentially bolted to the frame. It's called body on frame, or what we like to call bolt and bushing. Vehicle on your left is all welded together into a complete body cage body structure. And that's important. The fundamental difference between carbon steel and stainless steel. Carbon steel rusts. It corrodes over time. When metal rusts, it becomes weaker over time. I know this is Florida, this isn't, up north where we spread salt on the roads, but believe it or not, the air in this environment is approximately 90% salinity. So there is corrosion that happens. So stainless steel does not rust over time. Engine placement. Engine placement is critical when we talk about the maneuverability of the bus, the turning radius. The vehicle on your left, the engine is in the rear, meaning that the operator is forward of the front axle. The reason why that's important is because in tight urban turning applications, because the operator is forward of the front axle, that creates an overhang. So theoretically, the bus can drive over curbs, can drive over things. It increases the maneuverability of the bus. The bus on your right, the operator is over the axle because the engine is technically in the front of the bus. And kind of like with school buses, sometimes when you get into a tight turning situation going around corners, it can't do it. It has to kind of back up, do a 3-point turn, and continue on. So maneuverability is key in urban applications, which is what the PSTA trolley service encounters on a daily basis. The bus on your left is considered a low-floor bus. We're going to come back to that in a minute, all right? The bus on your right is a high-floor bus. And the difference between that is the bus on your left, because it's a low floor, and low floor buses have been around since 1994, and that was in response to increasing the ease of access for the ADA community or people in mobility devices. I heard a statistic last week in Washington, D.C., that as of today, 99% of all vehicles, transit vehicles, are ADA accessible. 15 years ago, if you can believe this, only 50% of public transit vehicles were ADA accessible. So we've come a long way for increasing the ease of access to the ADA community. The bus on your left, as you can see, is a two-door bus. So two doors can be used for boardings and alightings. This increases the efficiency when you encounter high ridership. People can enter and exit on either door. The bus on your right only has one door. It only has one door for entrance and exit boarding and alightings, which means that typically what happens, because people can't board and exit at the same time, usually there's a trade-off, who gets off first or who gets on first. Like elevators, typically you gotta let people off the bus to let people on the bus. As you can see on the bus on your left, there is a wheelchair ramp because it is a low floor. So with a low floor bus, being that it has a wheelchair ramp, there are no steps that you encounter when you board the bus. The bus also has the ability to kneel, which means that if you have various curb heights or various terrain, the bus can actually kneel. It can pivot down anywhere between 6 to 9 inches, and therefore, if done correctly, when people enter the bus, it's a smooth transition. They don't have to step up or down. The bus on your right generally cannot kneel, and it has approximately 4 to 5 steps that people have to climb up in order to board or alight the bus. The other difference is that with a low-floor bus on your left, when the ramp is not being used, it folds back into the bus, folds over itself, and becomes a part of the door threshold. Therefore, the ability to have 2 doors to enter and exit is preserved. The bus on your right, there is a wheelchair lift. We'll come back to that in a moment. But with that particular type of lift, when the lift is stowed, not being used, it actually blocks the door, okay? It cannot be used other than for the purpose of ADA access to the vehicle. So for all those differences between the two vehicles, that is $100,000 of the cost difference. Category 2 is critical system equipment. This is the equipment on the bus which separates how long and how reliable and what the longevity of these key components will be. The first one we talk about is the braking system. Probably the most important systems on any vehicle is, can you stop? The vehicle on your left is a pneumatic air brake system. The vehicle on your right is typically hydraulic. The reason for the differences between the two is generally the weight of the vehicle, much like your automobile. And what exactly is the vehicle going to be doing? So the key differences between an air brake system and a hydraulic system is that air brake systems are much more powerful than mechanical or hydraulic systems. That's why you see them on over-the-road trucks, long-haul delivery. The vehicles weigh quite a bit, and the cargo, or in this case, the passenger loads, weigh quite a bit. Air brakes are more efficient. They have less maintenance. Obviously, they run on air, not fluid. And even if an air brake system has a leak, it can still be used. Actually, air brake systems function by nature differently than hydraulic systems. In an air brake system, the air actually holds the brakes off. In an air brake system, the brakes are either on or they're off. In a hydraulic braking system, being that it is fluid, if there are leaks in the system, I'm sure we've all had issues in an automobile where the pedal feels spongy or we've got air in the line, okay, that can cause a situation where the braking performance is diminished. If you have fluid leaks, there is the opportunity that at the individual braking component that the fluid could leak on the brakes themselves. This will actually also cause issues with stopping the vehicle. And as you heard me mention just a second ago, when it comes to safety, air brakes are the most safe in this application. As you heard me mention, air brakes are either on or off. If a vehicle with an air brake system should lose all air, no air in the system, the vehicle will automatically come to a stop. In a hydraulic system, if you lose all pressure of the system or you lose your fluid, you can't actuate the brakes because it's a pressurized system that utilizes the fluid to push the braking components together to bring the vehicle to the stop. Not to mention, air is all around us, so that's why in a pneumatic system, what actually allows the components to work, there's plenty of air. In a hydraulic system, there's fluid, lose the fluid, brakes don't work. But one of the other things about hydraulic brake fluid is that it's hygroscopic. It pulls moisture by nature out of the air. So if you ever, this weekend, have nothing to do, open up the hood of your car, look at the master cylinder. If your fluid is turning brown or is black, you need to change that. There's water in there, all right? And what happens when water enters hydraulic brake fluid, it actually decreases the boiling point of that fluid. And when brake fluid starts to boil, that's bad news. You're not stopping. Suspension system. Just like our heavy-duty transit buses, the bus on your right has fully floating airbag suspension. Fully floating airbag suspension has numerous benefits over the bus on your right, which is considered a shock and spring system. Obviously, as you're driving down the road and the body is supported by air, impacts in the road, speed bumps, changes in terrain, the passengers on board generally don't feel that because the suspension is absorbing it. The bus floats. That's why when you see buses sometimes going down an uneven road, they kind of bounce a little bit. The bus looks like it's bouncing. You're actually not taking the shock through your seat or if you're standing. On a shock and spring system, it is known as a rigid system. Numerous studies have shown that on those particular vehicles, especially people in mobility devices where their device is secured to the floor, that when you roll over speed bumps or if you hit a pothole, that they actually feel the most shock, the most disruption through the frame of the bus, through the suspension. The other thing with a rigid suspension is it's usually supported by rubberized bushings throughout the chassis to provide a little bit of absorption of that shock. Obviously, over time, those bushings do wear out, and if they wear out, then you have issues with not only the suspension system, the steering system, but also the body itself. It'll start to shake itself to pieces. Electrical system. Obviously, we put a lot of electrical components on our buses, the ITS systems. And you need to size an electrical system appropriately for what you're going to put on the bus. The bus on your left has a 24-volt, 450-amp multiplex system. As we all know, most automobiles, most light-duty vehicles is a 12-volt DC system, which is fine for those applications. With a 24-volt split system, which is both 24-volt and 12-volt, when you have an increased ability of voltage, you decrease the amount of current that you need, which in turn decreases the size of the wiring that you need, right? When you have a 24-volt and a 12-volt split system, you are able to take those high voltage components, such as your starter, such as camera systems, such as a bunch of other stuff, and you're able to split the loads. You can have some on 24, you can have some on 12 volt. Multiplex is multiplex is a term that we use where instead of having very large circuit boards with lots of fuses and lots of wires come in, you have a module that has small amounts of wires that come in, and you're able to distribute that load. So less wiring, less maintenance, more efficiency. HVAC system, it's Florida, needs to be hot. This is one of the other key critical components, which is to the comfort of our passengers. Bus on your left has a Thermo King 407C system. Bus on your right typically has a 134A system. The difference between that is when we talk about what the efficiencies are. A 407C system is 75% more efficient than a 134A system. 134A systems are usually in light automotive and medium trucks. This is important when we talk about pull down and recovery. Pull down means that when you go out to your vehicle and it's a hot day, you start it up, you turn the air conditioning on. Pull down is how long it takes from the vehicle being 100 degrees down to 70 or 60 or whatever that set point is. Recovery is like opening the door to your refrigerator over and over. Every time the door opens on a vehicle, you let cool air out. So the recovery is how long does it take that after the doors are opening and closing to return that temperature to the set point of what the vehicle is. So the larger the bus, to accommodate more ridership, the better recovery you need to have, because the doors are opening and closing constantly. And in some cases, if you're boarding many people at a particular stop, those doors could be open for almost 5 minutes. So you need to return that bus to a comfortable setting when it's 100 and some odd degrees out and 100% humidity. ADA accessibility, moving forward, you heard me talk about a ramp and a lift. With a ramp, there are very few moving parts. In fact, there's really none. It is all electric. And should the ramp experience a malfunction, then the operator can just go out of the bus and lift the ramp and it'll stow on itself. It's very lightweight, but don't let that fool you. While it may be lightweight, because of the design of it, it can support up to 1,000 pounds. With the vehicle on the right, it is a lift. And the way that works is, when the lift deploys, it is at vehicle height, typically 5 to 6 feet above the ground, because it's a high floor bus. It needs to come down to ground level. Person is loaded. It needs to be brought up to vehicle height. Person is secured in the vehicle. And then the lift needs to be stowed. Keep in mind, those lifts are usually located at the rear of the vehicle. In that typical application, the operator must leave their seat, go to the outside of the bus, control the lift, go back into the bus, secure the passenger, get back out of the bus, stow the lift, then get back to the driver's seat. So there's a lot of walking back and forth. The vehicle on your left, the operator could control that right from their operator's seat until it's time to secure the passengers, so there's a time savings.
Henry, what does that do to the capacity on the Jolly Trolley type? Does that lose several seats because of the size of the lift and so on?
So those particular style lifts generally take up or do away with some seating, and that's generally along the back wall. In some cases, you can put seating there and they'll flip up like this, but it does take away a couple seats because it physically occupies a space. Those lifts are also very heavy. So usually in these design setups, that lift probably weighs anywhere between 400 to 500 pounds. And generally, the batteries are located on the same side. So what happens is that is additional weight, so the bus actually is always inherently heavier on the curb side of the vehicle, which on most of these vehicles has an independent front suspension. So you're always going to have some issues with uneven tire wear or even alignment.
Are they hydraulic lifts?
They are electro-hydraulic. So, as you heard me mention, the vehicle on your left, it's just, if there's a malfunction, it's just as simple as picking the ramp up and stowing it. The bus on your right, you actually have to pump it like a car jack to make it go up and then finally stow. So that's also time consuming. And in a high ridership route, it takes a lot more time to operate the lift on the bus to your right, the low-floor ramp design is made for rapid stow and go. Stow, deploy, stow, go, is what they call it. Also, one more important thing is that the lift on your right, that is known as a vertical pillar fork design, tower design, and it has hydraulic arms. And while it's fine for the occasional usage, say 3 to 5 a day, if you're talking 10, 20, 30 deployments a day, what actually happens is those are prone to structural fatigue at the base of the pillar. They're not designed for heavy usage. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So Category 2 cost is about $87,000. That's the differential. Last but not least, we talk about Category 3. Category 3 is all of the ITS components that you find and our passenger expects to find when they ride a PSTA bus. So ITS systems include the CAD system, the automatic vehicle location system, the GPS system, the cameras, the automatic passenger counters, the passenger Wi-Fi, the fare collection systems, not only the traditional fare boxes we have, but the new fare validation tap card systems and mobile app payment applications. The passenger displays, both on the bus, but also the systems that feed the signages that we have, although very old, at our terminals. So that's generally $84,000 for all those ITS components. That is all included in the $485,000 to the bus on your left. Generally, the lower cost alternative may include destination signs of a level. They may include cameras, but traditionally, these buses do not include those. They're considered options. For us at PSTA, all of our buses are ordered with these because they're requirements. So they're included in the cost of the bus. So in closing, while the bus on the left may seem more expensive, again, going back to the application that we're going to subject them to, mass transit duty cycles. Basically, you pay a little bit more up front, but because it's the right vehicle for the application, you actually end up with lower maintenance costs, higher levels of reliability, the service quality of the passengers, the comfort is increased, and there's actually fewer instances where the bus will not make it to the length of time and the life cycle we want it to, which for this is 12 years, 12 to 15 years. That's what we traditionally run. So, the action item before you is to recommend the approval to purchase 20 of the hometown trolley streetcars at a total cost of $8.528 million, and then approve the purchase and installation of the required technology at $1.60 million for a not to exceed of $9.7 million. Just to be clear and clarify, the $884,000 in your action item is the total cost of the bus with both the trolley and also the required ITS components that we'll put on.
Okay. So as Henry said, you can understand why I call him the subject matter expert. He's like our very own Bill Nye the Science Guy on all of this. And the first step in an action plan here is to approve the purchase of the trolleys. And what has come out of the robust discussions we've been having on this topic is we're going to take a good look at future longer-term contracts with our partners on this. And that's one of the things we'll take a look at, as well as expanding out to Bel Air Bluffs is an option for our partners at Jolly Trolley to do that. So today, I will open it up for any questions before we have a vote.
Questions? Thank you, both of you, good job on the presentation. Questions? Mr. Schulman?
Henry, can you share what the difference is if we were gonna purchase our traditional diesel hybrid bus, our normal system bus? What is the cost for those, and how do they compare to these buses as far as the features and items that you described?
Just bear with me. So I broke this down 3 different ways. So the cost per bus of the hometown trolley, $484,402. If we were to purchase a modern-day Gillig 35-foot low-floor diesel, that would be $615,000. And if we were to purchase the comparable modern equivalent today in a hybrid, that would be approximately $854,000. So for 20 vehicles, the heavy equivalent Gillig would be about a $2.6 million, and then the hybrid version would be a $7.3 million difference. So to answer your second question is, the trolleys and the Gillig equivalent trolleys are a 12-year heavy-duty rated bus. The buses that we're proposing are rated for 10 years and 300,000 miles. However, due to the physical construction and the components that are on them, it is rated as a heavy-duty bus. There is a requirement that all buses that will be used in transit must go through Altoona testing. It's essentially a stress test in order to be purchased with federal funding. We receive copies of these reports. And in actuality, this particular bus right now, although being rated for 10 years, is going through the testing to be approved for a 12-year heavy-duty bus. So it is essentially a lower-cost alternative to the heavy Gillig buses that we have now.
Sticking with that, what is the, do you have an estimate of what the operating costs and maintenance costs are for those between the Gillig and the trolley version?
Between the Gillig equivalents versus these?
Correct.
So I would say it's the trolley, the lower cost trolley is probably just maybe 10% less in terms of the cost per mile, because the components are generally comparable to each other.
Okay, so between the hometown trolley and the Gillig, the operating and the maintenance costs and the operating costs are?
The hometown trolley will be a little bit less than the Gillig vehicle.
Okay.
I don't have specific
And then that's
numbers.
fine. It does beg the question then why we buy any Gillig buses. If we're saying that the hometown trolley bus is operating and maintenance costs practically the same, and it's $150,000 less expensive per bus. So I'm just wondering, you know, we're
So let me clarify what makes the cost differences between the models. I just mentioned that from a structural body and equipment standpoint, that those foundation components are essentially similar or same. Where the cost increase comes from is on a Gillig bus, the actual upcharge in making it look like a trolley bus. So all the cupola packages, all of the wood trim, both inside and out, the cow catchers, especially with a hybrid version, being able to make the components on the roof accommodate the hybrid batteries. That's actually what makes the cost difference that apparent.
okay. I guess what I'm struggling with is that and both you and Debbie made these comments. So Debbie said that the buses can be moved to another route, the trolleys can be moved to a different route. And then you said that we want the right vehicle for the application. And so what I'm taking that to mean is that these trolleys can move to a normal operating route, and they would still be the right vehicle for that application. But yet, we're also, but when we go to buy vehicles for that application, we're buying Gillig buses that are more expensive. So I'm trying to understand that there seems to be a break there that doesn't make sense to me.
But we don't buy Gillig buses anymore.
Well, I'm just saying that if.
I mean, I've argued that we should.
I know.
And I've argued that if that's the case, then we shouldn't be looking at these more, and I agree with you, but, you know, the policy of this board, which I don't agree with, has been to buy the hybrids. It's a
And-
whole different, you know, a whole different,
And you are 100% correct. I was trying to at least keep it at a comparable for this part of the conversation, but that also is true. So really just trying to figure out whether these make sense in the quantity that we're looking at. And that would truly be, if there are changes to routes, would these buses be the ones that we would pick if it was just brought to the board as a question? Or would you be presenting a different bus for our normal system? As Commissioner Eggers pointed out, would you be coming back and saying, well, we shouldn't buy those buses because they're diesel, we should be buying the diesel hybrid buses?
I think from an environmental standpoint, you know, the diesel hybrid or electric is better, it's going to cost more. But I think one of the things that my takeaway on all this is we were challenged as staff to say, find a different solution than we've traditionally had. So, you know, normally when we think of a trolley, we think of maybe the lower cost version, which we know is not applicable on the routes that we run. So I think through the research and the work that Henry and his team has done to come with a solution, you make a valid point. We can take a look at things going forward to say, what is the best application? If these apply to that, is that what the board wants to do on a diesel basis, or does the board want to go with a diesel hybrid or an electric bus based on the availability of funding? Because the funding is still, for the most part, not on the electric at this point, 100% other people's money that I cannot use elsewhere.
Right. Separate question, do these, it doesn't really matter which version, but are the buses expected to have protective shields as our normal buses have?
They're budgeted. The quote, cost includes safety shields.
We have the
All
money,
buses
we have the
going
money to
forward will
put
have
shields
that.
on these trolleys, but we're debating whether we're gonna do that.
Okay, well, that was the question. I wasn't sure if the trolleys themselves, that those routes were going to have protective shields, so I didn't know if these included.
We haven't made a final decision on that yet.
Okay.
I have one question. Is there any type of warranty on these buses?
Absolutely.
So is it like a 3-year, 5-year?
Typically, there's a 1-year bumper to bumper. And then when you break down the individual components of the bus, the engine, the HVAC system, the electrical system, those generally have 3 to 4-year warranties.
Well, that's gonna make your life a lot easier.
The warranties are similar to the transit buses we have now. If I could take one moment and go back and kind of provide some additional insight with Commissioner Solman's question. Right vehicle, right application. So you heard me mention early on the presentation, demand, duty cycle, and application. So if I could take a few minutes and just talk about what does duty cycle mean? So duty cycle is essentially what are we asking the vehicle to do in terms of propulsion, all right? So part of factoring in duty cycle is, does it run down the highway at high speeds? Does it have suburban type settings where average speed is 20 to 35 miles an hour? Or is it downtown urban where perhaps the speed is 5 to 10 miles an hour on average? So the reason why we picked this bus for this application is, from what I understand of the route profiles, which translates to the duty cycles, these runs are approximately functioning between 25 and 30 miles an hour. So a diesel engine, and in case this vehicle, is appropriate for this application. When we look at hybrid electric buses, because those are generally urban applications, lots of stop and go, because of the way our hybrid systems function, which is in a series type application, being that it's hybrid, the engine doesn't have a very big duty cycle, okay? It generally functions between 700 and 1,000 RPM, so it's controlled. If it was a traditional diesel engine, every time you press the accelerator, it would have to rev itself up past 2,000 RPM. It would be up, down, up, down, up, down, which generally creates more wear on the engine. It's a decline in fuel economy. With a hybrid electric bus, it's smoothed out. That's why we see the higher levels of fuel economy. These particular trolleys do not come in a hybrid electric option. If they did, we would have explored that too and see if it would have matched the duty cycle of these routes.
Okay. Commissioner Cox?
Yeah, hi, and I totally understand why this particular vehicle is being chosen because of the way it's going to run. I've ridden the trolley from Tarpon down, and it's the vehicle on the right, and it's a really rough ride. There's some bad, potholes and Arizona. I was a little leery because of the diesel aspect, but knowing that these do not come in a hybrid. I mean, I'm good with that. You just explained a very good point because you're going at a lower rate of speed. It's an appropriate engine for that. So, that being said, I believe this is a good one.
Okay. Commissioner Eggers?
Well, they do come in hybrid, so, just so you know.
Well, not this particular vehicle.
Trolleys can come in hybrids, that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
They do have them available. I mean, it just depends on how much you want to spend.
There you go.
Yeah. And so just a couple questions, just so I understand. The Jolly Trolley contract rates, these rates that you showed earlier, the $80, $78, I'm assuming that the Jolly Trolley contract rate, because you said it, includes bus funding.
All the proponents for that particular contract bid on it, we don't know what goes into their dollar amount. We just know that they've given us a dollar amount that was competitive.
So
Same thing for
if
Woodward.
they go out and buy 10 buses, you're saying that $80 number is going to go up?
I don't see how it
because
couldn't without losing money.
Well, because it would include
Yeah.
so these numbers don't include bus purchases, is what you're
I
saying?
can't say what they include or don't include. I just know as a business person myself, if I were buying a bus, I'd want to pass that cost on to the consumer of that service.
So that's what I'm saying. Does this $80 bus price right here that has buses in it already include bus
I
financing?
don't know what I honestly, Commissioner Eggers, they just bid one price to us.
Okay, so you can't say whether or not, if we buy new buses, that this is gonna go up or not. We don't know.
Well-
Because there's already numbers, we would assume, based on what you said, and I'm just asking because I wanna make sure I get it, that includes bus prices in that number, according to what you just said.
Right,
It
all
makes
I'm
business
saying,
sense.
It makes business sense to include it, so if you're buying more buses, you pass that on in your hourly rate to be able to recoup what you're spending or financing to do. That then goes to
I get
operating.
it. But they already have buses that they're already recouping in the rate. So they're replacing buses that are leaving the fleet and bringing new ones in. So that number would still be reflected in that. I mean, I think you're presuming things that and I'm just trying to make sure I understand the comparisons between, because you're saying the PSTA, which is a fully loaded operating number of $78 per hour, fully loaded on all of our costs.
No, it's not. That is our incremental cost to be able to run the service. So if we did additional service where we had to add, additional hours on, that's the cost per hour. So if we were to look to add additional service where somebody else, doesn't matter who it is, has to buy additional vehicles to be able to do that, it's beyond their vehicle capacity today to do it, then that would increase that cost per hour. I don't see how it couldn't.
Again, it takes takes time to pay these buses off. So I'm assuming that the buses that are there now are in the numbers.
I'm assuming so, but I don't want to make that assumption because I don't know what went into
I
it.
understand.
Commissioner Eggers, but maybe I don't speak, we have a contract, that we signed, and that's the price. We had a really good meeting, as I mentioned earlier, with the folks from Jolly Trolley and talked about extending their contract, having a 10-year agreement. After this 5-year agreement is over, the next contract would be a much longer contract, which would give them more stability, give a private provider more options, as Debbie presented, to finance purchase of buses, or, at least depreciate the value of a vehicle over a longer, they would have more guaranteed revenue coming in. Jolly Trolley does have charter operations that at least they describe as paying for their vehicles, that they can use that money to buy vehicles. So they do have another source of revenue that can help pay for trolleys. Now, so whether or not the $80.80 includes, I don't know. I don't personally know that. We're talking about additional. If we expand the Jolly Trolley service, they're gonna need more vehicles. Can they generate more money out of other sources of revenue? Maybe. We don't know. But it does seem like they would likely need to pass some of the cost on to PSTA in an additional, on a higher rate. We haven't negotiated any new 10-year contract rate. That would be subject to negotiations.
I hear what you're saying, I just don't know the answer, and that's why I'm asking. What's in the $80, and what would the additional purchases be added on to that number? That's all. If there's no dollars, if there's no capital dollars in the 80, no capital dollars in the 80, and they're buying new buses, and it would have to go on top of that, that would answer a question.
Right.
But there may be capital dollars already in the 80 because they have buses already. So if they're replacing those capital dollars with new capital dollars, it wouldn't necessarily just be added on, it would just be maybe supplanted. I don't know. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand apples and apples, that's all. And then this is an incremental, it's not the entire PSTA dollar per hour.
Correct.
The number. It
Correct.
does not include a lot of other expenses. So for PSTA to run these lines, it's more expensive than $80 an hour, because you're not fully loaded. It's not all of the expenses over your hours of operation. The total dollars that PSTA has. So PSTA does an additional mile of driving, it's more expensive than that just $80.
No, it's the additional mile of driving will be the $78.89.
So,
Because you don't need to add a second CFO or a second, administrative.
but you don't have to add it, but it
Right.
needs to be spread into those numbers.
Right, and I think everybody, when you're doing the numbers on these, just as Brad said, Jolly Trolley runs an additional service for the charter service, so not all of their costs are allocated into that number either. They allocate their costs between charter and.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
And
I'm
I
not.
think Mr. Clifford would love to say something.
Well, it's
about
nice
the
that we'll be
challenge.
able to have them at the table to talk because they are a partner in this conversation. So, yeah, I'd love to hear from them.
For those of you that aren't familiar with Jolly Trolley, we are a non-for-profit. It started out as a community service on Clearwater Beach and has grown over the years since 1982. With that in mind, profit is not our goal. We were asked at our meeting the other day of why do we do this? Well, you all traveled a lot, you go around to a lot of different communities based on tourist economies. You always see some type of trolley system, and they're all kinds. There's for-profit, not-for-profit, public transportation system may support it, but our financials are public record for you to go and look at. But we finance probably 95% of our new equipment purchases through our trolley charter service. That $80 figure that you're seeing there, that basically covers our operating cost, our fuel, our tires, our labor, our insurance, all of those things. There may be a small portion of that, maybe 5% of that number is what we would term our revenue, return, or profit. And that obviously may go back into buying equipment, but it's a very small portion of that. So just to clarify where we are, the nonprofit designation makes a difference to us. I don't get paid. I'm a volunteer. We have a volunteer board. Rosemary's our CEO. She runs the day-to-day operation. We have a COO. Then, of course, we have our drivers and our maintenance people, our mechanics. So it's not like we need to have a 15% return on our investment in what we're doing. We're investing in the community because we think it's important for a tourism environment to have a trolley service. And trolley service is much different than what you see on a traditional public route. The mindset is different when you're going down Gulf Boulevard, or you're going down Clearwater Beach, or you're traveling from Clearwater to Tarpon Springs. Those people have a different mindset than what your daily riders have. Although we do have daily riders on our system, the vast majority of the people that ride the Suncoast routes are tourist individuals. Not everybody comes to the beach with a car. And some people don't want to take their car. If they have one, they don't want to take it out of the barn, put it on the road. They would prefer to get on there. And that's why, as Brad has mentioned, and as Debbie has mentioned, our numbers, our performance numbers, your performance numbers on your trolley routes and our performance numbers on trolley routes are significantly higher than what you have in your fixed routes in the urban environments that we have around the county. So hopefully that clarifies how we finance our equipment in that. There is a small portion there, maybe 5% being paid on the monies that you're paying us for our hourly service that we provide to you, but the vast majority of that is from other revenue sources that we have.
Thank you.
And just, again, I think that the whole thing that's generated the conversation in the last month or two is the whole idea, I think we just touched on there a little bit, was the mentality of the service that goes along the beaches is different than anywhere else in our system. It's different than our system, to a large degree, that goes from downtown St. Petersburg to St. Pete Beach, and the riders that ride them. I'm not saying there aren't any tourists on those, there are, but you have a day-to-day service that goes, it's just different than the tourism market that goes along the beaches. So the question was, do we want to expand that service? So I'm glad to hear that you're at least thinking about that a little bit in the next contract, partway down. Because I just think for two reasons. One, I think it's what they do. They cater to tourists. They don't have, as you said, the glass protections. They have a lot of interactions with their, with the riders, and it's a fun experience along the beaches. It's just different than when you ride a bus. But the second thing is, and this probably isn't for today, maybe for another time, as we move forward in the next year towards what will likely be a call for a referendum on funding additional things, we will be looking to, in many cases, provide additional headway in some areas of our bus system. That'll be one of the ideas behind it, an increased bus purchase program. And so I just think that there will be drivers that we can maybe displace from the current system into other areas of our system and not increase the number of riders to our system. So I just, as we go through the next year, just maybe start thinking a little bit in terms of some opportunity costs for us as PSTA folks by staying in that business, when we could maybe as time goes on, divert some of our employees to other parts of our system, to our other routes that hopefully will be increasing the number, from 30-minute headways to 15-minute headways. We'll need more buses, more drivers, more costs. So maybe a way to temper that a little bit and allow some of our partners expanded on areas that make sense. So, so in any event, I thought Commissioner Schulman had some good questions about the Jolly Trolley that you talked about today as a cost comparison with the hybrid diesels that we do now. So those are all my questions for now.
He said only one more, I hope. And it's actually a two-parter, because I can only have one question. the purchase, this contract's for 20 vehicles, or the recommendations for 20 vehicles. That's split up into 2 separate delivery lots,
Right.
correct? So 10 vehicles in 2020, and then another 10 vehicles, I presume, at the end of 2021?
Yep, and there's what, about in 1 year?
We get the first vehicle about 12 to 13 months, and the 20th vehicle approximately 20 to 23 months later.
Okay, and Debbie, you said that there was a historical 5% increase in the cost of these vehicles over time?
Yeah, over the, and we've actually put on the newest, not on where this is coming from, because this is coming off the state of Georgia contract. But we've actually put on our regular bus consortium, there's a 5% cap on what they can go up, because some years it's gone up as much as like 8%. So I'm not sure what the cost increase would be on any delays with this, but I'd imagine it would be.
Is there any sense as to what the cost difference was during the last recession?
Oh my gosh, I actually have a history somewhere in there of it going back up. Are you telling me there's a recession?
I'm saying that traditionally, large capital items decrease in cost as businesses are looking to fill orders and keep
I
employees
can
working.
probably go back and try to put something together on that.
Okay, because
If
ultimately,
our-
CPI goes up and down.
Yeah, no, but yeah, it does, but some of our contracts that we have do not follow CPI for the buses under the consortiums.
well, and ultimately, my concern, and this kind of goes to all of my questions, and I've shared this with others, is whether we're going to need that many buses for the Central Avenue trolley. As people shift to the BRT, Commissioner Egger shared also that it's less of a tourist, it's more, we have regular riders on the Central Avenue trolley. And then I don't know if we do buy these extra buses, if they are the right fit buses for the rest of the system, and if we should be having, if the board would prefer diesel hybrid buses that we normally purchase for the rest of the system. So I'd be inclined to move forward. I think that the bus that's being recommended makes sense for the system that we have, but with a decrease in the total number of vehicles. Yes, thank you.
If we didn't buy these 20 buses, or if we bought 10, whatever, what would be our bus quota to purchase this year for our fleet, the regular buses? Would we be?
We normally buy 8 to 10 buses. With the funding that we have, we can actually, we're spreading it out over 2 years just because of the delivery cycle on this. But we'd be able to buy, more buses this year. One of the things maybe we could do, because the delivery is spread out, one of my concerns, and maybe Henry can address this, is if we wait and see what'll happen to 2021, I know I'll be adding minimally then, if we buy 10, $1.2 million of additional operating costs for the rebuild of the other buses, because we're going to have to do that to keep the number of buses going in the system. That's my concern there, and maybe we could do something up to 20 buses.
My concern also is what Commissioner Schulman is talking about is speculating on the fact that we're going to have a recession. And we don't normally engage in speculation in this kind of organization. So I'm a little reluctant to divert our choices away from recommendation of staff on this. So my suggestion is, and I'll ask for a motion, my suggestion is that we move forward with the purchase of 20 trolleys in the hometown trolley vintage or style for a total cost not to exceed $9.7 million. But I need a motion for that. I'm not going to make the motion.
How many buses, how many of these trolleys of the 20 would be, you showed us up there real quickly, would be on the beach part, and how many
8.
would be on the Central Avenue?
8 and 5. Let me go back. So we're reducing where we are from today. And as we said, with the popularity of the routes continuing, all the routes continuing to increase, You know, we may have needs to put these elsewhere within the, I'll call it trolley areas. But we had an internal discussion on, you know, we can use these elsewhere as well. I think it's been a great learning experience for us to be pushed by the board and by Brad to think outside the box.
I'll make a motion. There's no more discussion. And by staff's recommendation to approve the purchase of 20 trolleys and the required technology at a total cost not to exceed $9.7 million.
I second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
So we're 3-2. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Henry. Okay, our next item is Hastas upgrade. Al, would you?
Cassandra's
I'm
gonna
gonna
take the
start.
lead.
You're gonna be Al today?
It's my department that uses it the most.
Okay.
But this is a set of software that we use across the agency. So it starts off in scheduling, and this is how we develop our schedule. Every agency has a set of software package like this. And as it moves, as the system moves from scheduling into operations, they use this software in transportation to track day-to-day work, make changes in the scheduling. This is the database that goes to our automated vehicle locator system. And so it's really an essential function of the agency, and to have this software, we'd be doing a lot on paper and pencil. Finance also uses the system to track time and then pay people. So also very important for our operators, and the components that we're asking for today, we've been talking about a long time. They've been in our capital improvement program for a number of years, and we've been working through the contract, which Al will talk a little bit about, with the vendor. So the components that we're adding through this request will be driver's bid sheet. We're going to do that all automated on the web. Right now, we do it on paper and pencil in the driver's lounge. We're going to automate our time point system that connects with what we do for our automated vehicle locators. We have a lot more self-service for the drivers, and including the tracking of family medical leave time. And so this is going to make the day-to-day operation of using the system, translating from the schedules to the operators, much more efficient, and allow the operators to have more control over what they're doing with their daily work, and have our transportation department be able to track it.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement. I'm really excited about this procurement here. When I first came to the agency, we had a contract with Hastas or Giro. We also had a triennial when I first got here, and the existing contract the contract that we had was the only finding that we got from an agency, because it did not have all the terms and conditions that are required from the Federal Transit Administration. So when we received the request for the purchase of these additional modules, that was one of the sticking points, and we've been negotiating this contract for about a year and a half now. As of about 2 weeks ago, Giro accepted all of our terms and conditions, working with BMO staff, Nikki Day to be specific, and we finally came to a mutual agreement where they have taken all of the terms and conditions. I'll just let you know that Giro is a Canadian-owned company, so that's where they had a little reluctancy on accepting all of Buy America provisions, et cetera, et cetera. On July, we received the requisition to purchase it. We posted the sole source because it is a sole source. We posted as required by the Florida statute. We received one response to that, and that was from Giro Incorporated. And that's when we entered into negotiations, and until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we've been in negotiations. From a fiscal impact, I think Cassandra already touched on that part. It's $500 funded by FTA grant funded, and the recommendation is recommend approval of a one-time purchase with Giro Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $500,000.
Okay, questions? How would the input be done? You said right now the drivers are doing it on pencil and paper format.
Right.
So will they have like a keyboard or something like that on in the buses themselves, or will the operators carry
This will be the-
handheld?
This will be the big, so how they choose their work. So 3 times a year, we change the schedules, but the operators get to choose what work week they're going to do. And so we come up with an entire roster of positions that has, okay, you want Saturday and Sunday off, you want Tuesday, Wednesday off, you want to work from 6 a.m. to 2 or 2 p.m. to 10, right? How many days a week? Do you want 4 10s or, so there's like different types of shifts that people can choose. And because the schedules change and the times change, it's like a giant puzzle every time. And so the operators, in order of seniority, choose what roster position they're going to have. So now we would automate that and put it all online as opposed to putting paper books out and having somebody check what, is everybody doing it in the right order at the right time? Who's the next person to go? This would all be on the web, and they generally have like 10 options that they put out there, so when it's their moment to choose, if their top 3 options have been taken, the 4th one goes in. This would allow them to put that in there and then have the bid. It usually takes, what, 3 days?
For bidding?
For bidding?
It takes about 9 days.
9 days.
Okay,
But
so,
this makes it much more like a fantasy football draft,
Yeah.
where you can do it from home.
Yeah.
yeah, okay, so they would basically use a computer, sitting at a desktop or a small computer, tablet, but they're not gonna be operating it while they're driving or something like that. They're gonna do that in their off time or.
This is not, this is not during driving. No,
Okay,
this
all
is-
right.
it's just-
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, Commissioner Cox?
Did you have something?
I did have a question.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to know, so this is a one-time purchase. We then own these upgrades? There's no service down the road or potential cost that we see coming for updating their suite? We host this software. I know we have some software packages where we buy and then there's service contracts that come up a year or 2 later to.
We have the main part of this program. We're already using it. And so these are additional modules that we're attaching to that main program.
But we don't expect any additional costs later
No, sir.
for,
No.
No, sir.
they want to upgrade the
No,
timing
sir.
program.
All the, we are, with the
Yeah.
contract that we have, all the maintenance and stuff, this does not impact the maintenance agreements that we have. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just want to mention too, that the schedules are really kind of complicated for the operators, because some do operate on schedules, like they'll come in at 5 a.m., get off at 8:30 or so, then come back at 10:45 and work till 5, so pencil and paper, it seems like it'd be very difficult. To automate it is a great idea.
Any other questions? Only other question I have, I don't know who's the best person to answer this, but if we've got only a sole source for this type of program, is everybody apt to using this? And no.
Basically, PSTA does not, or at least the CEO of PSTA does not like to do sole sources, but I don't think our procurement director does either, but there's basically 2 companies.
Yeah.
You're either a Hassis city or a Trapeze city.
Uh-huh.
And then,
Yeah.
I don't know when that
And there
was
the
selected,
twain
but
shall
then they
meet,
never
right?
changed.
And there the twain shall meet. It'd be difficult
Right.
to switch to the other system, it'd be
That's
massive.
exactly right.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, so we're kind of stuck, is what I'm really asking, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why it took 2 years for Al to finally
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course,
Okay.
you can always change horses. It just takes a lot of resources to do
It
it.
costs a lot of money.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other questions? All right, do I hear a motion?
Move approval?
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously, thank you very much. Okay, Cummins contract.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Al again. This action item here, I'm not really comfortable. It's kind of, but one thing that I am is I'm transparent in everything that the procurement department does and the agency does. Just to give you a little bit of background, When I first got here, the procurement department had lacked a little bit of attention. So one of the first things that I wanted to do was I wanted to look at all the solicitations and all the contracts to make sure that they were in accordance with the rules and regulations. Debbie and Brad allowed me the opportunity to issue a task order to Clifton Larson Allen to have that done, and I felt very comfortable after that. And then I moved into different phases. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to confirm the expiration date with the dates that were in our ERP system, which is FleetNet. So that took a little bit of time. And if you remember, months ago, I think like a year ago, I brought a huge omnibus before you to allow Brad to be able to exercise options on contracts. So that was a way that we were able to manage the expiration dates on the contracts that we currently have. The next phase of what I say my plan was to look at how much the board authorized us to spend on the contracts, and then in comparison to what we actually have done. And we've done a lot to help, we've fixed that. And if you notice, over the course of my tenure here, about a year and a half, we've brought a lot of contracts before you within a short period of time. And that was to make sure that we get the expiration dates and the expenditures and everything in line. During the course of a routine audit, I discovered something, and that's what this action item is all about, to be transparent and let you know exactly what was discovered. I think last month or a month before, we brought to you an action item that allowed Brad and I to be able to make minor changes to a contract. And I believe one of the things that was asked, and it was asked several times, is are we allowing you guys or staff to be able to change the value of the contract? And we told you no, and if we needed to change the value of a contract, we would bring that before the committee or board. So with that, this action item is for Cummins Inc. engine contract value ratification. And according to the government contracts reference book, a ratification definition is the act of approving an unauthorized commitment by an official who has the authority to do so. So we have engines, and engines is the driving thing, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we purchased engines. The action is recommend approval of increasing the value of Cummins Inc. engine contract an amount of $489,000 for a new value of $1,589,670. In May, the Board of Directors approved a contract with Cummins Inc. an amount of $1.1 million over the maximum of 5-year period. Since then, we have replaced approximately 68 engines, with the average cost of each engine being $23,000. In October of 2017, procurement staff did not reconcile core credits appropriately, which resulted in an overage of $189,000. And in 2019, during an internal audit, it was discovered that an additional $300,000 was added to the contract. When I found this out, we stopped purchasing engines totally. And that occurred roughly around the June timeframe. So we have not purchased any engines since June of this calendar year. Since 2019, measures have been put in place to prevent this from occurring again. For example, now we reconcile the contracts database, which is attached to your packet here. We reconcile that twice a month. And what I reconcile is, I reconcile the expiration date versus the award date, and the expenditures versus what the board authorized. We still have a need for engines, and some of the fleet will require replacement engines in the upcoming months and years. As a stopgap measure, upon approval, the agency intends to competitively procure on an as-needed basis until the new contract is procured or approved. The agency intends to go out for a new solicitation, not for a maximum 5-year period, but for a 2-year base with 3 one-year options, so it can monitor expiration and the expenditures better. When you put it in the contracts database, or we put it in our ERP system, and the past practice has been to put it in for the entire 5 years, the dollar amount and the whole term of the contract. Now what we do is we enter only the base And once that base, and we exercise the option, we follow it, we include that at that time. That helps me and my team, to be able to monitor the contracts. Once again, the action item is recommend approval of increasing the value of the Cummins Inc. engine contract in amount of $489,670 for a new value of $1,589,670. Any questions?
Questions? Commissioner Schulman?
So, and I'm a little confused. So have we already spent the 489,000?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That 489,000 expenditure was reflected properly in our financial statements at the time?
Yes, sir, and it was budgeted for.
Okay. The 23,104, the average cost of the engine, was that what was expected to be the average cost of an engine? We just had more engines than we thought? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the dollar amount that we were being charged, or we were paying per engine, was what we expected to?
Yes, sir, it was in accordance with the contract.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, so just again, for clarification, the original contract was for 1.1 million for 5 years, so that would take us through 2021.
Yes, sir.
In theory. We've already spent the 489,000, and we already spent the 1.1 million.
Yes, sir.
So we have no more money to buy engines in that 5-year period.
In regard to the contract, there is money from a budgetary perspective, from a budgetary aspect for the engines.
We do have a budget in the annual budget for engines. There's no problem with that. The board approved specifically to buy Cummins engines for 1.1 million max, and Al just found out that we just kept buying off the Cummins contract when that number had already been eclipsed. We should have bid this out again a year or so ago.
But we had a 5-year deal with Cummins.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we didn't hit the time. We didn't hit the 5 years, but we hit the max that the board approved of 1.1 million.
So where are we getting the engines? Where would we be getting the engines now?
We have not procured, since June, we have not.
Up until June, they kept erroneously purchasing off the Cummins contract, and Cummins didn't raise it, of course, because they were happy to get the business. And Al found it out. We haven't bought any since. In the short-term period, he's gonna do a little mini procurement for each engine, and get bids,
That
and
was
then,
my point. So-
and then get into a new long-term contract.
So
When is
between
it?
now and the next year and a half or 2 years, we're just gonna do these? Why
Spot
can't we
buys.
just go to the regular procurement now?
Because we have a need for engines now, and this is just a stopgap measure until we can go out for an official contract.
So we're gonna wait for another year and a half to do that?
No, sir. Upon board approval, if the board approves it, what we're gonna do is we're gonna buy, I think, like 5 engines now, and then we're immediately going to put out a full-blown solicitation for an actual contract. The small 5, it won't be a contract, it's more like a spot buy.
Now, just a question maybe for Henry, is this an area, I've always wondered how we've extended the life of these buses. We were going along, and I remember distinctly saying we were buying 20 to 25 buses a year. And then all of a sudden, we dropped it down to somewhere between 10 and 12 buses a year. Obviously the maintenance program, but is this probably part of it, is that why we're expending more on engines than we had anticipated, because we've bought less buses, and so we've had to do that? Is that kind of the?
There's a lot of different factors. Funding availability, the number of buses that we have, and how many miles they put on each year, and when they come due. We don't essentially do necessarily midlife overhauls. We have programmed when buses will be due from a reliability standpoint. So there's a lot of different combination of factors. I mean, if if funding was available and all of the buses that we would need to be replaced, if the funding was available at that one moment in time, okay, the question would become, would we replace all of the buses at the same time? And the answer from a maintenance perspective is no, that's not a good idea, because you would just have to deal with the same problem whoever's sitting here 7 years from now. It might be me, so.
Libby? Okay, go ahead. Commissioner Cox?
Yeah, just to Al, and I'm reading here also that the staff did not reconcile the core credits appropriately, which was almost a $200,000 overage. That has been addressed now.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, so, from a perspective of making, preventing this kind of thing from happening again, where we're sort of between a rock and a hard place, how do we have in place systems to make sure that we kind of audit ourselves so we don't run into a situation where we're not funded for what we need?
Excellent question. Right now, what we do is we look at contracts twice a month. The way that we're, and I look at the expenditures versus what the board authorized us to spend. Also, I look at the expiration dates versus the term that the board authorized. The way that we're putting this into the ERP system, contracts into the ERP system, is different than the way they were put in the past. So I'm 100% confident. I'm 100% confident that this won't happen again. We take a lot of pride in what we do in procurement, and Debbie entrusts me, and Brad, and we just monitor, and we do self-audits all the time on our solicitations, on our contracts, and what goes in and out of the ERP system now.
Okay. We don't have a lot of choice on this, but we want to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. We're a public entity. We need to make sure that we're not doing anything that's not totally correct.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think it was a really good point that you brought up. And I certainly, I guess, I appreciated your introductory comment about being very uncomfortable with this, because frankly, this is a system that should be in place to catch these kind of things. It shouldn't be coming to this, so I'm glad that that's now hopefully been addressed.
It has.
I'm also a little perplexed that our auditor didn't pick this up.
Yeah.
And so, maybe, again, I know audits don't go into every single bucket and check every single thing, but it might be interesting to find out how that kind of got missed. But this is a major problem. I'm glad you've taken care of it. But you found it through your own internal audit, and so.
Yes, sir. I think, and Debbie could probably elaborate more, the way that the ERP system have been managed in the past, and when you look, and even from an auditing perspective, if you look and you just look at what's inside the screen without actually touching the documents and going into the contract files, I think maybe that may have been a reason why it didn't. I know that Clifton Larson Allen, with a contract of this size, this is one of the first ones that they pick out and they do an audit on. So they check all the paperwork, but now staff is going one layer deeper into, okay, let's actually look at the action item, let's look at the actual contract in comparison versus what was in the system. So all that information has been kind of input into the system anew.
So they dealt with the information they had. And
Yes, sir.
Perhaps they didn't have the right information.
Correct.
That's what
Yes,
you're
sir.
saying. So that might explain the external audit miss.
Yes, sir.
So, well, I commend you on finding it, and I certainly hope we've taken care of that.
The other thing I would just say, as far as the root of the problem, and Commissioner Cox mentioned it, when you replace an engine, you can take what's called the core of the engine and send it back to a Cummins diesel, and you get a credit. You get money back. that was part of the confusion, is how the money came back. We're paying them, you know, we're writing them checks for engines, we're getting money back. And I think that, it's not an excuse. It just, it's like what really happened. Why this, it was being netted against the contract, so they didn't think it was over, but it was.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So do we need a motion and a second on this to clarify, to get this done?
Yes, sir.
We're gonna bring it to the board?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. All right. Do I hear a motion on this?
I would move to approve.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed?
No,
All right.
aye.
Are you opposed?
Yes.
Okay, 4 to 1. All right, I'm apologizing to Commissioner Gerard, I'm sorry we ran over a little bit. So if we could move to the reports and get those knocked out fairly quickly, so we don't take up all the committee's time.
On the financial statements for August, which you have in front of you, we're in October right now. We're working very hard closing fiscal year 19 and closing the month of September. So August is what it is at this point. We were anticipating a deficit of 4.75 million, and we were less than 1% off on that. Passenger fares were down about 93,000, and on the expense side, staff is still holding really tight on controlling new expenses. Service expenses were higher due to the timing of some higher dollar invoices that came through for training and coaching, but those were anticipated. It was just the timing of it hitting the budget. And our year-to-date August numbers, we're exceeding budgeted expectations by 45%. So we're looking good going through the end of August. Passenger fares are well over budget, carrying the revenue year-to-date. And expenses continue to be well contained with the exception of the trolley expense and the salary expenses. So all in all, it wasn't bad considering the story of fiscal year 19 isn't quite done yet. We still have one more chapter of September, but looks good though. Any questions? That was as quick as I could do it and still say everything.
Questions? Okay. All right, Julie, thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and contracts, Debbie?
Thank you. We've included another column in the contracts report at the request of the committee. And that is to, on the very right-hand side, there's an average annual amount, just to give an order of magnitude. So that when we talk about these contracts, give you an idea, it's not gonna be exact of what's actually spent each year. It'll give you an idea. Of course, our top couple contracts are Care Ride, which we talk about quite a bit, that services our DART customers. Jolly Trolley, and then Fuel are our top ones. Of course, Gillig was from a bus purchase that we had. As you go through and you look at any of these, just feel free to ask any questions at any point in time regarding our contracts. And I am very proud of Al for doing the continued self-audits that brought this to light, for wanting to bring the one issue to the board.
Questions? Okay, thank you, Debbie. And ridership, Brad?
Well, I'm seeing the report for the first time as you are, but I note that we, looks like we finished the year 87,000 more rides than last year. So that's success. That's all I have to say.
Okay. All right. Anything else that we need to address this time? Okay, if not, do you have something?
No.
Okay. If not, meeting is adjourned. And again, I apologize to our folks on the following committee here. Commissioner Gerard, jump up and
We'll take a
Take over.
2-minute break and then
2-minute break, okay.
reconvene the plan on it.
I'm headed to the county.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.